all of our provincial and territorial counterparts, and our international partners to do what is best for Canadians.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister Blair. Maintenant, c'est à vous, Ministre Duclos.
Merci, Madame la Ministre Freeland. Comme coprésident du comité, j'aimerais commencer par remercier tous mes collègues de leurs efforts considérables au cours des dernières semaines pour répondre à cette crise unique dans l'histoire du pays, une crise à la fois sanitaire et sécuritaire et économique. J'aimerais aussi remercier nos partenaires des provinces, des territoires et des municipalités qui travaillent tellement fort avec notre collaboration pour garder les Québécois et les Canadiens en sécurité chez eux. Et j'aimerais assurer tous les Canadiens que le gouvernement canadien va faire tout ce qu'il faut pour les garder et pour nous garder en sécurité au cours des prochaines semaines.
Okay, and I will just say before we take your questions to remind everyone that Dr. Tam and Dr. New will be available to you to provide that expert public health advice as soon as you have finished dealing with us.
Okay, so we're going to take 5 questions from the floor, then we'll go to the phones. Reminder, we're using the microphone. We're going to go Joanna Smith from Canadian Press, and then Marie Vestel-Le Devoir.
Hi, good afternoon. At those 4 airports, when people are being asked to self-isolate, are they going to be asked to self-isolate there, or are they free to go home?
No, what we're instructing them after they have been processed, and again, these are for people who are not symptomatic, but for all others who are coming in, they'll ask to go home and then begin the process of self-isolation. And with the documents and information that we'll give them advice on how that might be accomplished safely and healthily.
And what measures are you taking? I mean, presuming there's going to be much longer lineups now to go through processing. That's crowds of hundreds of people and gatherings much larger than governments are recommending people gather in. What measures are you taking to make sure that airports themselves don't become a vector for disease with these touchscreens, in particular the questionnaires?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and measures are, in fact, being put in place. First of all, as a direct result of the measures that have been taken limiting non-Canadian travelers coming in from international destinations, there will be significantly fewer people that have to be processed. But we are taking measures in the processing areas and in the hallways approaching them to ensure that proper social distancing is practiced there. There will be available CBSA officers, our border service officers, who will be there provided with masks for people who may be symptomatic and be able to take people out of those lines. And as we've also indicated, people who are symptomatic as they arrive will be met right at the gate and not put into those processing areas. I am also aware, and perhaps Mr. Garneau could mention, that other efforts are being made to make sure that the areas in which arriving passengers are processed are regularly cleaned and disinfected to make sure that they are safe and healthy environments for this action to take place.
So perhaps Minister Blair covered it, but essentially we were in touch with the airports last night, and this is for all airports, with respect to trying to lay out things so that there is more social distancing when people arrive at the airport, whether they're on their way in or on their way out, and secondly also that increased levels of disinfection take place at the airports.
Okay, we're going to go Marie Vestel-Le Devoir and then Lina Deeb, La Presse Canadienne.
Hi, I don't know if this is for Mr. Hajdu or Mr. Blair, mais Monsieur Garneau, si vous voulez répondre, vous pouvez répondre en français. I'll just ask it in English because I don't think you're wearing your earpieces. In regards to travelers from the U.S. who are still allowed to come in, they will not be directed to those strictly 4 airports where you're redirecting traffic. They will be going still to every airport. So are there any extra measures that are being put in place for those travelers, given that Ontario Public Health today said that they have snowbirds coming back from the United States who are contaminated, for lack of a better word in English? What are you doing to ensure that those people who you are still letting in don't just spread out the virus even more?
If I may, all of those in those airports, because there are other international flights coming from the U.S. and other sun destinations that are coming in there, all of those returning travelers will be given exactly the same information. They'll have to fill out the same forms. They'll have to advise if they are symptomatic, and on the form they will also have to acknowledge that they have been advised to self-isolate. There are additional questions that and observations that will be made in those airports by our officials. If anyone is symptomatic, there are processes in place to identify them and appropriate referrals to public health. And in every case, all of them will receive information to self-isolate. And that, by the way, is not just those snowbirds, as we often refer to them, people who currently are, maybe spent the winter down in Florida or in Arizona. Many of them will be driving back. That same information will be provided to them as they cross into Canada, ensuring that they understand the need to self-isolate for 14 days. That's the advice that's been given by Public Health Canada, and that's the advice that will be communicated to each and every one of them.
Alors, en français, tous les Américains qui viendront au Canada seront assujettis à un questionnaire, d'abord pour leur demander leur état de santé et deuxièmement, pour qu'ils confirment qu'ils ont été informés du besoin de s'isoler pour 14 jours après leur arrivée au Canada. Ils devront en fait indiquer qu'ils ont reçu cette information avant de pouvoir quitter l'aéroport.
Minister Hajdu, do you want to add anything?
I think that's covered it.
Okay.
Okay, and on that decision to only have other flights, not U.S., so to essentially close the border to any other countries except the U.S. and others. But about the U.S., the Prime Minister has sort of exposed his reasoning for not banning U.S. flights, saying the trade is too integrated. But how does that prevent you? You've been quoting scientific expert evidence. So what is that evidence that prevents you from banning visitors and tourists and still maintaining trade? Why can't you do one and not the other?
Let me take a crack at that on the Canada-U.S., and
Sure.
then I think our colleagues may all want to chip in. So when it comes to the Canada-U.S. border, I think it's very important to say that this is a situation which we are reviewing constantly, in real time, in very close collaboration with provinces and territories, with Canadian business, with unions, and very much with our public health authorities, and of course with our U.S. neighbors. The Prime Minister spoke with the President yesterday and was on a G7 leaders call this morning, and Minister Blair spoke with his colleague, his counterpart, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Canada and the United States have the longest unmilitarized border in the world, and that border, we all know, is absolutely vital to the daily life of people who live on both sides of that border. At the same time, I think both Canadians and Americans understand that we need to constantly be reviewing the practical measures that we can and need to take to protect the health and safety of Canadians and Americans. And that is something that we are constantly reviewing and we are working on. As Minister Garneau said, the strong recommendation to self-isolate for 14 days after coming into Canada from outside Canada also applies to people who are coming to Canada from the United States. We have understood, just because of the way that that Canada-U.S. border in particular is a lifeline for both of our countries, that there do need to be some carve-outs to that strong recommendation for essential workers. People like the truck drivers who are driving trucks of food in both directions across the border. People, as Minister Garneau said, like air crews. There are other categories of essential workers as well, and that is a situation which we are closely and continuously reviewing. Je peux me répéter en français? Non, ça va? OK, est-ce que quelqu'un...
The scientific reasoning behind not still allowing trade but banning visitors. Why can't you just do one and you have to keep both open?
If I may, both of our countries, Canada and the United States, have issued warnings against non-essential travel, and so I think that is very consistent with our approach that would significantly limit the people that you refer to as tourists and others and visitors. And so, but it is an acknowledgement of essential travel, and we also recognize that in the these circumstances, at this point in time, that we believe that the risk of those essential workers crossing that border can be managed effectively with the screening that we've put in place and with the instructions and oversight of Public Health Canada for isolation measures where required. And so I think it is important to acknowledge that we recognize that our country's the critical infrastructure and our economies are significantly integrated, and additionally that there are Canadians on both sides, Canadians and Americans on both sides of that border who need, for purposes of their employment and to help keep Canada running properly, to be able to move across that border. But we will put the appropriate measures in to mitigate the risk that may represent to Canadians.
Minister Hajdu, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just, I think my colleagues have summarized it well. I mean, what's called for is really a continental response, as we know, with an integration of supply chains, and in this case, critical supply chains that include food and essential goods that Canadians rely on every day. What we do on the American border is going to have to be done thoughtfully and in partnership with our American cousins, as well as our Mexican partners. And so this week, I have a scheduled call with Secretary Azar and my Mexican health counterpart to talk about a North American approach. Obviously, there are challenges in this situation that are unprecedented, but I know that Secretary and Azar both believe that we have to be cautious and prudent in how we apply this so that it doesn't pose other health risks to Canadians and Americans that would include running out of essential goods.
Okay, we're going to go to Lena Deeb and then Ashley Burke.
Maybe I'll try you again on the same topic, Minister Hajdu. Just talking about health and science and not taking into account the goods. I'm still not clear on why are we still letting Americans come into Canada? We're not talking about truck drivers. I mean, they can get specific permits to drive food trucks. Why are we not shutting the border to all Americans when we see what's going on in the States and the health picture of things?
Well, again, we've advised all Canadians to avoid non-essential travel. Our counterparts are in the process of doing the same kinds of measures around the world. I will say that making sure that we get the right specific details about what are essential workers is critically important. That's work that's happening right now, I know, with Minister Freeland and others around making sure that the policies we put into place together is not going to have an adverse impact on the functioning of either of our countries. Listen, you heard my opening remarks. Canadians are worried about their food supply. This is a real thing and a live thing in North America where we have an integrated economy, integrated supply chains, and where both countries rely on each other to provide essential goods that include foods and other products for our homes, etc., including medications. So it's very important that we do this with a degree of precision and in the spirit of a strong relationship that much of the work that we've done in previous on things like NAFTA has been conducted. And that's the work that we're doing right now. We'll have more to say in the days to come.
Peut-être pour ma prochaine, je peux essayer, Madame Freeland. Est-ce que, quand vous avez discuté avec les Américains de la possibilité de fermer la frontière, est-ce que leur réaction vous a poussé à prendre la décision que vous prenez là et non pas une décision plus rigide, plus rapide? Est-ce que c'est la réaction américaine qui inspire votre décision?
Non, absolument pas. Notre décision était une décision qui était prise par les leaders canadiens aux têtes avec le Premier ministre. On a eu une discussion du cabinet entière hier quand on a pris la décision. C'est une décision pour protéger la santé, la sécurité des Canadiens. Et pour nous, pour notre gouvernement, la santé et la sécurité des Canadiens sera toujours notre priorité. Et le Canada, nous sommes un pays souverain et nos décisions sont prises par les Canadiens pour les Canadiens, toujours.
Okay, we're going to Ashley Burke, CBC, and then we're going to take some from the phone.
Minister Hajdu, there's been a lot of talk about that the window is narrow to flatten the curve. How narrow is that window? And as well, does the data suggest that Canada right now is flattening the curve?
Well, thanks. Those are really good questions. And the window is narrow because now we will see an acceleration of cases. We now have community transmission in a number of locations across Canada. And what that simply means is that we cannot actually pin a case to international travel, that we are seeing it spread from community member to community member. And so we are at a critical phase, as Dr. Tam said, because the intent now is to contain the cases as rapidly as possible and to slow that spread. In terms of, so that's how narrow the window. Could you repeat the second question, please?
How does suggest that Canada's flattening the curve right now?
So it's too early to tell. The answer about the curve and whether or not we're flattening the curve, it's too early to tell. What I can say is that the evidence so far suggests that our early measures have been successful in actually being able to pinpoint where cases are and to not have the widespread transmission that we've seen in other countries that have taken either unorthodox measures or not taken any measures at all. For example, we knew we had cases before we had deaths. In some countries, they knew they had deaths before they knew they had cases. And that is a very bad sign. What that means is you have uncontained transmission and people who have been sick for a long time before they die, allowing for further spread. In our case, because we have had a steady progression of measures based on science and evidence, we've been able so far to be able to contain our spread. But now as we see our cases grow through community transmission, this, as Dr. Tam said, is the critical phase. This is why we're calling on all Canadians to take these extreme social measures, including staying home, including working from home, including the cancellation of events. Later, Dr. Tam will make an announcement that we're now asking people to consider canceling events that are larger in size than 50 people, because the time is so critical. And so I would urge all Canadians to do what you can to be part of flattening the curve.
There are a lot of Canadians right now that are abroad trying to get home. They're trying to follow the government's advice and book flights. Some of them have to wait days, and there's a fear out there that they're going to be stuck in another country. That country's border could close down. And as Minister Champagne's been saying, there won't be repatriating Canadians from around the world. Are you talking to airlines to try to make sure they're still flying, getting extra flights there? What is being done to make sure Canadians are not stuck abroad?
Thank you. So we are conscious of the fact that some people are Canadians, are abroad and are having difficulty returning and will have greater difficulty as a result of the measures that we have announced today. So we are talking with the airlines, but in addition about the possibilities to bring people home. It's the very early stages at this point. But also I would say that we are also putting in measures, funded additional consular support and partnerships with on the medical side, so that if there are Canadians that are abroad that could not come home because they were symptomatic and have to attend to their medical needs, that there will be some assistance there from the consular point of view and financial assistance, and that if they have to stay outside the country for a period of time unplanned because they wanted to come home, that there will be a fund to provide some financial assistance to those Canadians.
Okay. We're going to take one more from the floor, and then we're going to go to Marika Walsh for the Globe and Mail.
Hi there. I'd like to get some more information about what the coordination is between the provinces and the federal government. Canadians across the country are getting very different information. I understand different jurisdictions. I understand different caseloads and all of those things. But the Prime Minister said today there's an aligned response, and we're not seeing it. So why isn't Ottawa giving a baseline minimum response that everybody needs to take, and then provinces can increase measures where it's necessary, for example?
Okay, I'm going to maybe ask Minister Hajdu to talk about the very close coordination that is happening on the public health side, and then maybe I'll make a couple comments about cooperation with provinces in general.
Well, thank you for the question, and I will say that that's exactly what's been happening since the very early days when we first noticed that cluster of cases in Wuhan. Dr. Tam convened what's called the special committee that pulls together public health officers from all across the provinces and territories with the federal government to begin that close coordination to prepare for what could and what did eventually become a pandemic. So that coordination is happening, and there are baseline guidance provisions provisions at all different levels, at technical guiding levels for hospitals and for practitioners, a variety of other kind of considerations, including procurement professionals that are working across jurisdictions to make sure we have a scope of the knowledge about what's needed, where the gaps are. That work has been going on since very early January. Of course, we have also provincial and federal jurisdictions in terms of the types of measures that we can take and our own distinct responsibilities. And so the work that Dr. Tam is doing is to try to coordinate a response, but also to recognize that provinces and territories have the jurisdiction to act in a number of ways that is independent of the federal government.
And if I could just add that, we very much recognize, as Minister Hajdu has just said, that there are specific conditions in specific cities, specific provinces. That's why we have public health officers also at the provincial and the city level. And those public health officers are all behaving in, I would say, a very admirable, proactive and energetic fashion. As Minister Hajdu said, there is very good national coordination of all of the public health officers. And at the political level, on Friday, we had a call chaired by the Prime Minister of all of the First Ministers. Since then, over the weekend, I spoke with a bunch of premiers directly. So did the Prime Minister. We plan to now have regular calls at the First Minister's level to coordinate our national response. That's going to be very important. And then just finally, it is so important, given that this is first and foremost a question of protecting the health and safety of Canadians, to be very clear with all Canadians that the federal government absolutely acknowledges the need for federal leadership. We are not going to quibble about federal provincial responsibilities here. The federal government will be there to be sure the Canadian healthcare system across the country has the resources to deal with this situation, whether it comes to our national bulk procurement efforts or the commitment that we have made to provide financial support to the healthcare system.
Okay. Operator, take a question from the line.
Thank you. Once again, please press star 1 on the telephone keypad if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. The first question, la première question is from Hélène Buzetti from Le Devoir, Hélène Buzetti du Devoir. Please go ahead. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. Ma première question est pour M. Garneau. Vous avez reconnu aujourd'hui qu'en restreignant les vols d'étrangers, il y aura vraiment moins de vols qu'avant. Ça pourrait compliquer les choses pour les Canadiens qui tentent de rentrer au pays. Donc, pouvez-vous juste réitérer, le Canada exclut-il de rapatrier par lui-même les personnes? Et si oui, on l'exclut, à quoi ressemblerait cette aide financière dont vous parlez? Est-ce qu'il y aura un plafond, pas plus que 5 000 $ ou pouvez-vous donner plus de détails?
En ce moment, on n'a pas exclu différentes options, mais on commence à parler avec les lignes aériennes pour voir s'il y aurait possiblement un plan pour rapatrier certains Canadiens qui sont à l'étranger mais qui ne peuvent pas revenir en raison des changements ou parce qu'ils doivent ajouter un délai parce qu'ils sont symptomatiques vis-à-vis le coronavirus. Alors, on est en train d'explorer et on est au tout début de cette exploration avec les lignes aériennes s'il y a des possibilités de ce côté-là. Mais en même temps, on reconnaît qu'il va y avoir un besoin pour plus d'aide consulaire. Alors, c'est quelque chose où nous allons mettre du financement. Et aussi, on reconnaît que certaines personnes vont être obligées de rester à l'étranger pour une période plus longue parce qu'ils sont en train d'être soit guéris ou de passer à travers la période de 14 jours. Et puis, on cherche à les aider financièrement parce que c'est un fardeau additionnel pour eux. On n'a pas établi de plafond, mais on a identifié un fonds et on va avoir plus de détails dans les jours à venir.
Et mon autre question serait peut-être pour Mme Freeland. Vous avez dit que seuls les citoyens ou les résidents permanents pouvaient revenir, puis il y a quelques exceptions aussi. mais certains s'interrogent sur les personnes qui détiennent un permis de travail, par exemple, ou un permis d'études, qui n'ont pas à proprement parler un statut au Canada, mais qui vivaient ici et qui sont peut-être allés faire un petit voyage à l'étranger. Eux, peuvent-ils revenir au pays?
Les gens qui ont le droit de revenir au pays sont les citoyens, les résidents permanents, les familles directes des citoyens et résidents permanents, et nous ferions des exceptions pour les personnels essentiels. Le ministre Garneau a déjà parlé, par exemple, des pilotes, les gens comme ça. Et
non, mais
il y
je vous
a
parle de permis
aussi des
d'études.
autres travailleurs qui font du travail essentiel, qu'ils doivent avoir le droit de revenir au Canada, aussi les diplomates.
Mais les permis d'études?
Les exceptions sont pour les gens qui font des travails essentiels. Ça peut inclure les études essentielles.
Okay, operator, can we take another question?
Yes, la prochaine question. The next question is from Manon Cornelier du Devoir. Next question is from Manon Cornelier from the Devoir. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, ma première question, bon, je ne considère pas que vous avez répondu à ma collègue clairement sur la question des permis de travail et d'études. Alors, si vous pouvez ajouter ça à ma réponse, Mme Freeland, ça m'arrangerait. Mais je ne comprends pas pourquoi on nous parle qu'on veut éviter pénurie d'aliments, médicaments, entre autres pour expliquer qu'on ne ferme pas la porte aux voyageurs américains. Pourquoi on est incapable de dire les touristes américains, eux, seront interdits d'entrer? Pourquoi on ne les interdit pas? Ça n'enlèvera rien à nos chaînes d'approvisionnement et ça ne bloquerait pas les travailleurs essentiels. Alors, j'aimerais savoir pourquoi eux ont le droit de rentrer les touristes américains.
Concernant la frontière avec les États-Unis, quelque chose. Premièrement, on a déjà dit, comme le ministre Blair a souligné, que tous les gens qui vont au Canada d'étrangers, incluant les gens qui vont au Canada des États-Unis, doivent s'isoler pour 14 jours. C'est une mesure forte, c'est une mesure pour tous les gens. S'ils sont canadiens, s'ils sont américains, s'ils vont de la frontière, de la terrain ou par avion. C'est une grande chose. Deuxièmement, comme le ministre Hajdu a dit et comme Dr. Tam a dit pendant la fin de semaine, tous les Canadiens sont recommandés de ne pas faire des voyages non essentiels aux étrangers. C'est aussi une mesure forte. Concernant la possibilité de prendre les autres mesures avec la frontière aux États-Unis, je pense que tous les Canadiens comprennent que c'est une frontière spéciale pour le Canada. C'est notre seule frontière sur le terrain. C'est une frontière essentielle pour la vie économique, la vie sociale, même comme le ministre Hajdu a dit, pour l'approvisionnement de nourriture au Canada. Alors, tout ce qu'on fait concernant la frontière avec les États-Unis, on doit faire des mesures très, très spécifiques. On doit faire du travail spécifique et en détail avec les leaders des entreprises, avec les syndicats, avec les provinces, avec nos partenaires américains. On est en train de faire ce travail. C'est une situation que heure par heure, qu'on est en train de voir ce qui change, mais je pense que les Canadiens comprennent qu'avec cette frontière, on doit prendre les mesures on doit être certain que tout ce qu'on fait ne créera des problèmes dans notre pays, même des gros problèmes pour la santé des Canadiens. Et peut-être le ministre Duclos veut ajouter quelque chose.
Vous avez très bien résumé, Madame Freeland. Je me permettrai quand même, comme l'occasion m'en est offerte, de résumer que les choses vont très vite depuis plusieurs jours au sujet des frontières et des transports aériens. Si je rappelle rapidement, il y a quelques jours à peine, les Canadiens étaient invités à éviter tout voyage non essentiel à l'étranger. Samedi, le ministre Champagne invitait les Canadiens à revenir rapidement au Canada, étant donné que la disponibilité des vols commerciaux était remise en question. Hier, il a été clairement indiqué que tous les voyageurs au Canada, qu'ils soient canadiens ou autres, devaient s'isoler durant 14 jours. Cette disposition a mené à la mise en place par le ministre Blair dans les aéroports, dans tous les aéroports, d'une question additionnelle qu'il a résumée tout à l'heure, la question étant: prenez connaissance de cette information que vous devez vous isoler durant 14 jours et certifiez que vous avez pris connaissance de cette information. Donc, tous les voyageurs qui passent par les aéroports au Canada et à Dorval en particulier, depuis hier soir, doivent certifier qu'ils ont pris connaissance de leur obligation de s'isoler durant 14 jours. Je le mentionne parce que M. Garneau et moi-même avons eu des conversations avec Mme Plante, la mairesse de Montréal, au cours des dernières heures. Nous l'avons informée de cette situation qui existe déjà depuis hier. Elle a reçu cette information avec gratitude et je pense que maintenant les choses sont plus claires pour tout le monde.
Et je pense que le ministre Garneau a aussi quelque chose à ajouter.
Oui, sur la question qui a été soulevée par Mme Buzetti et Mme Cornelier sur les étudiants, notre emphase dans la planification de l'approche qu'on prend a été vers les travailleurs essentiels. Mais vous avez soulevé une question importante et on s'engage à vous revenir sur cette question.
Okay, I'm told, unfortunately, that brings our news conference to an end. Apologies to those on the list who did not